Here they come. And I'm not ready. How could I be? I'm a new teacher and learning on the job. On the first day of my teaching career, I was almost fired for eating the sandwich of a high school boy. On the second day, I was almost fired for mentioning the possibility of friendship with a sheep. Otherwise, there was nothing remarkable about my 30 years in the high school classrooms of New York City. I often doubted if I should be there at all. At the end, I wondered how I lasted that long. It is March 1958. I sit at my desk in an empty classroom in McKee Vocational and Technical High School in the borough of Staten Island, New York City. I toy with the implements of my new calling. 5 manila folders, one for each class, a clump of crumbling rubber bands, a block of brown wartime composition paper flecked with whatever went into the making of it, a worn blackboard eraser, a stack of white cards that I will insert row by row into slots in this tattered red Delaney book to help me remember the names of 170 boys and girls who would sit in rows every day in 5 different classes. On the cards, I'll record their attendance and tardiness and make little marks when boys and girls do bad things. I'm told I should keep a red pen to record the bad things, but the school hasn't supplied one, and now I have to request it on a form or buy one in a shop because the red pen for the bad things is the teacher's most powerful weapon.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Isaiah Sheffer, and I want to welcome all of you to this tribute to our late great friend, Frank McCourt. I was privileged to be his friend over a good span of years, and Symphony Space was proud to have him as a member of our board of directors, as a regular reader at a quarter century and more of June 16th James Joyce celebrations, and as a reader at our literary series Selected Shorts. I was always happy when I ended up seated near Frank at the monthly meetings of the First Fridays confraternity, where the wit ran as high as the Guinness, which you'll hear about more later. I was present at the First Fridays meeting when he was challenged to put down a few pages of that memoir he had long been threatening to write. I loved him, despite his years of teasing me about the cultured West Side, and I was glad to live to see him converted into a true West Sider himself. Only 3 times did I ever see the level-headed, good-humored, equable Frank McCourt lose his temper or his cool. The first time was at 6 a.m. on a freezing June 16th morning, when he agreed with only a minimum of grousing to come over from way over on the east side and be interviewed about James Joyce and Ulysses by an Australian video crew, who, however, kept calling him Malachi. He didn't like that. The second time was when he agreed on this stage to read a difficult story from Joyce's Dubliners to an audience of restless, unruly, and let's face it, hostile high school students. Frank came off stage in a quivering outrage and said, "Jesus, Isaiah, I deserve combat pay for this one." And the third time was when he took me to task, quite rightly, for giving away the punchline of his great reading from Walt Whitman at our Leaves of Grass marathon. Do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself. Frank McCourt, this was a brilliant writer whose achievement of fame and recognition is one of the all-time heartwarming stories. This was a fine actor, a fact sometimes overlooked, but not on this stage. This was a generous supporter of a theater he looked upon as one of his spiritual homes. This was a very funny guy, and a master of rhetoric and language. Who can forget his telephone answering message promising to, quote, respond with alacrity? This was a loving husband, a beloved father and grandfather, an endearing brother. This was one of the boys, but a truly unique individual. This was, as they say in Gaelic, a real mensch. Or as Hamlet put it so well, he was a man, take him for all in all. We shall not look upon his like again. It's now my privilege to introduce, with a very special announcement, the Chancellor of New York City Schools, the Honorable Joel Klein.
Thank you, Isaiah. What a privilege it is for me to be here today to salute this great man, this great teacher, a hero among us. Unlike many of you, I didn't know Frank McCourt well, but I was privileged to come to know him and his wonderful wife, Ellen, who was really the love of his life. And if you'd seen them together, you could literally watch his skin change depending on what reaction she had to who was saying what. And she was the one, most of all, who didn't suffer fools gladly. I learned that the hard way. I met them both at a mutual friend who's here tonight, Lizzie Robbins. I thank you for that. It was about a decade ago, before I became chancellor. After I became chancellor, we saw each other on several occasions, and I must say he never hesitated to give me an earful about all the things that I wasn't doing right in running in New York City public schools. But he always did it with a twinkle in his eye, and he always did it with the feeling of putting our children first. I'm also privileged to have known Malachi. I actually knew Malachi McCourt before I knew Frank McCourt. Came to know Malachi when I was at Columbia College, and in my wayward time would wander down to drink much too much beer. He said to me tonight he'd be happy to give me my money back. I think he has no idea how much beer I consumed during that era. I don't think that'll be possible, Malachi. But just like Frank, you touched the lives of so many people. You were both born storytellers. And of course, on behalf of the children, the thousands and thousands of children during his 30-year teaching career, I want to thank Frank and salute his memory. I know the lives he's touched. I've talked to the children who've told me about that. And the millions and millions of readers, from Angela's Ashes to Tis to Teacher Man, which can always have a special place in the heart of educators. So it's a great privilege for me to be able to announce, thanks to the hard work of so many people in this community, so many elected officials, and so many people on my staff, that in September 2010, we're going to open up the Frank McCourt School at the Brandeis High School campus. Thank you. And we're going to start admitting children in the 9th grade. It's going to have a writing focus. It's going to be a select school, and I think it's going to not only contribute enormously to this community, but I am confident that of the many tributes that Frank McCourt would like to have listened to about himself, somehow it strikes me none more fitting than to have a school bear his name and teach generations of children to understand the tough art of writing, thinking clearly, and using the medium to change the minds, not just of youngsters, but of all of us. So people always ask me, why do I do this job? It's such a tough one. I do it for days like this, when I can stand before our community and salute somebody in the most fitting way that's possible. Thank you all for your love for this great man.